He crouched to the window gap. "Ma'am, name if you can." The woman's reply sounded like it had to climb a hill to escape. "Sloan." A breath. "Hartwell." Her cheekbones were glass-cut under skin gone sallow. Sweat beaded at her hairline despite the October air. The hand braced on her abdomen had a CEO's manicure, short, immaculate, practical. Sloan Hartwell. Gideon knew the name the way anyone within 100 miles knew it. Hartwell Dynamics had stamped its logo on every municipal drone, half the wind towers upriver, and the smart grid that powered his shop lights. She was on billboards he drove past to take his daughter to school. On screens, she looked like authority poured into a black blazer. Here, she looked like a woman trying not to fold in half while a child watched. Gideon leaned across the boy and tried the handle. Locked. He eyed the gap, then the boy. "I'm going to open it from inside." "Cover your face." With 2 fingers and the memory of a dozen broken hatches, he slid the latch rod up with a coil of mechanic's wire fished from his pocket. The door unsealed. Cool air rolled in. Pain had washed Sloane's features clean of media polish. She was flushing and paling in cycles. Left hand on her abdomen. Right hand gripping the seat belt shoulder strap. "Where's it hurt?" Gideon asked. "Upper," she swallowed, jaw clenching. "Right. Feels like a knife under my ribs." "Back too." "Any trauma? Fall? Food?" He watched her breathing, shallow, protective, every inhale like she was trying not to wake something angry inside. She shook her head minutely. "Meeting. Coffee. Nothing." She winced as the boy clambered close enough to touch her shoulder. "Mom," he whispered. The whisper ripped Gideon worse than the shout had. It was the whisper of a child doing math with the worst answer. "Name?" Gideon asked, without looking away from Sloane. "Orrin," the boy said. "Orrin Hartwell." "Good, Orrin. I'm Gideon. Here's the plan. You're going to stand by that tool chest and take deep breaths with me. Your mom needs calm air." He glanced into the footwell. Designer tote toppled. Phone on the floor. No visible blood. No vomit. No chemical spill. The hybrid had limped into his bay like a wounded animal that picked its own vet. Why here? Random? Or because the hospital was across town through construction and the shop sat like an island between? He shelved the speculation. Plan first. He stripped his hoodie and rolled it, slid it between Sloane and the door to brace her side. "I'm calling an ambulance." He had already hit 911 while crossing the concrete. The dispatcher came on as if she'd been waiting. "Name?" "Gideon Vale. Auto shop on Kestrel and 3rd. Adult female with acute abdominal and referred back pain. Severe. Diaphoretic. Tachypneic." The clinical words came without thought, muscle memory as easy as torquing a lug. Vitals unknown. Conscious. Guarding upper right quadrant. Copy. Ambulance en route. 8 minutes. 8 minutes was a lifetime when pain hollowed a person out like that. He thanked the dispatcher, dropped the phone into his chest pocket with the mic open, and adjusted the seat back with slow, narrated movements so Sloane's body wouldn't fight him. "Going to recline you 2 inches. Inhale. Now." He timed it with her breath so the movement met the softest resistance. Her eyes exposed something the billboards never had, fear with edges. "I can't." "You can," Gideon said, voice low, steady. "And you are. That's different from can't." Her mouth quirked like she wanted to argue on principle. Another wave cut the thought away. Orrin stood by the tool chest like he'd been ordered to parade rest. His hands flexed around nothing. Gideon took 2 steps, found a relatively clean rag, ran it under the shop sink, and pressed it into the boy's palms. "Hold this. Cool your face. That tells your body you're safe." The boy obeyed with the blank focus of a kid doing what an adult tells him because reality has narrowed to a single obedient road. The hybrid's power gauge flickered. Gideon felt, rather than heard, a faint thrumming through the frame that wasn't in rhythm with the motor. He filed the data and crouched again. Sloane. I'm going to palpate your abdomen lightly. I need you to tell me if the tenderness jumps. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. He pressed gently, methodical, quadrant to quadrant, the way a sailor checks a hull for leaks after a hard run. When he reached the right upper quadrant, she inhaled sharply despite herself. Positive Murphy's, he said softly. Which is? Her voice frayed on the edges of the question. Could be gallbladder. Or something angry near it. He didn't say pancreatitis. He didn't say stone. He didn't say perforation. People heard diagnoses like verdicts, and his job was to keep time moving forward. Ambulance is close. He glanced at Oren. How old are you, buddy? 9, Oren said. He watched his mother the way sailors watch a horizon, hunting for signs. Who brought you? I did, Sloane breathed, and it was so purely CEO, owning even that Gideon almost smiled. Then you did the right thing, he said. He believed in rewarding correct instincts out loud. It taught the body to repeat them under stress. Oren, can you bring me that small blue case on the wall? The kid sprinted, grabbed the first aid kit, returned. Gideon popped it one-handed and pulled a pulse oximeter. He clipped it to Sloane's finger. Numbers bloomed. Not catastrophic. Then a blood pressure cuff. He wrapped it around the toned muscle of her arm. The display climbed and settled. Hi. Pain will do that. He kept his voice measured when he told her the number. The ambulance wail arrived like a promise kept. Red paint flashed on oil-stained concrete. 2 paramedics slid from the truck with the choreography of people who've built their brainstems into algorithms. Gideon briefed them in 30 seconds flat. They had oxygen on Sloane in 10. 4 in 15. Monitor leads in 25. She fought a moan when they shifted her to the gurney, then she swallowed it as if sound itself would concede ground to the pain. What hospital? One medic asked. County, Gideon said automatically, because it was closest by 3 minutes and his shop was maps in his bones. Sloane's eyes flicked to him as if she could sign a contract with a look. He read the subtext, don't let them waste time choosing optics over survival. Oren had climbed into stoic silence. Gideon touched his shoulder. You ride with your mom, he said. Do exactly what they say. I'll follow with the car. The medic shook his head. We can't take a civilian in the back unless. That's her kid, Gideon said flatly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Some statements carried their own authorization. The medic glanced at Sloane, at Oren, at the eye contact that made arguing seem like a very bad PR move. He nodded. Front seat, then. As they loaded her, Gideon jogged around to the driver's side of the hybrid and put his hand on the hood again. The thrumming was stronger, no, wrong word. Not stronger. Hungrier. He listened the way he listened to weather as a young petty officer on a midnight watch, a hand on the bulkhead, feeling the sonar hum through steel. On instinct, he popped the hood. The engine compartment looked like money, everything tucked, sealed, and sleek. Something was off in the integration harness, a faint scorch where no scorch should be. The smell barely existed, a ghost of ozone. He reached for a flashlight and traced the harness to the battery management unit. A microscar across a connector. It would be easy to miss. It wanted to be missed. Sir, the medic called. We're rolling. Gideon shut the hood. He made a decision he didn't entirely understand yet. Go. I'll catch you. They left in a howl of siren incompetence. The shop fell silent except for the hybrid's cooling fans spinning down. Gideon looked at the car like it had just told him a secret. He had work waiting, a transmission rebuild half done on a Tacoma that would not rebuild itself. He had a daughter, Mara, getting out of school at 3, and he had a neighbor to text to grab her if he didn't make it. He had rent due and a parts order to approve and a slow leak in Bay 2 that he'd been ignoring with an empty drip pan in prayer. All that life hummed around him like the rhythm section of a song. Over it, a new melody insisted, something is wrong with this car in a way that is not natural. Where? He glanced at the clock, texted his neighbor, Maya, saying of borrowed sugar and last-minute pickups, and threw his body back into motion. He rolled the hybrid off the bay with a soft push and secured it in the fenced lot. He locked the gate. Then he grabbed his jacket, his wallet, and his keys. He'd seen worse than this and come out with everyone breathing. He could do it again. Driving behind an ambulance makes you greedy for green lights. Gideon's old tow rig had a V8 that drank like it had a grudge, the tires hummed a song he'd memorized. He kept 2 car lengths in his mind, 3 moves ahead, ER lot, triage, paperwork, intimidation factor of a man in a grease-stained shirt trying to advocate for a billionaire who didn't need advocates in this world, except right now she did. County looked like every county hospital he'd ever known, tired at the edges but held together by people who refused to let tired be the end of the story. The ambulance bay disgorged Sloane and her lines. Gideon parked where a sign asked him not to and jogged inside, practically shedding apologies for it even as he was doing it. A woman at the desk clocked him with one glance, that haircut grown out, posture that said he'd done time standing at attention, blue eyes that scanned and assessed and settled, and a grease smear across one cheek like a tired stripe of war paint. Family, she asked, eyebrows up. He could have said no. He said, yes, because truth is situational in a crisis, and right now the truth was that he was the only adult in this building who knew what that 9-year-old didn't need to see. Name, she asked. Gideon Vale. He leaned on the counter. The boy with her is Orrin. He belongs with her as much as possible. Her eyes softened. She printed a temporary badge and pushed it through the slot like she made exceptions for people who spoke her language. ER3, she said. Down the hall, left. He found Orrin perched on a chair outside a curtain, knuckles white around his mother's tote. The boy had been given a sticker, it sat untouched on his knee, a cartoon sun that felt like a cruel joke. She's in there, he said, pointing with his chin like pointing with hands would break him. Gideon crouched again so they were eye to eye. Okay. 2 jobs, he said. Breath slow with me. And hold that bag like it's made of glass. Orrin nodded, autopilot engaged. Gideon pulled the curtain an inch and stood sentry at its edge. Sloane lay under the white hospital light that makes everyone look like a ghost. A nurse adjusted the 4. A doctor palpated again. Ultrasound machine stood by, its screen a promise of answers. Miss Hartwell, the doctor said, voice calm and clipped. We're seeing signs of acute cholecystitis, gallbladder inflammation. We're going to confirm with imaging, manage your pain, and prep you for possible surgery. Have you eaten today? A granola bar, she whispered, as if her diet were a confession. Good. That helps. The nurse tapped a syringe. We'll start with a small dose. Sloane nodded. Her gaze drifted to the curtain edge where Gideon stood. She didn't look surprised to see him. She looked like she'd reserved a chair for him in a life where he shouldn't fit. He moved closer only when the nurse motioned him in. He kept to the no-man's land near the foot of the bed where you can be present without being in anyone's way. He watched the monitors without pretending to understand more than he did. He monitored the faces instead, the nurse's micro-relief when a number landed better, the doctor's not yet worry when something didn't. He learned long ago that you take your cues from the calmest competent person in the room. Orrin slipped his small hand into his mother's. Sloane's fingers tightened, and the relief that passed over the boy's face knocked the wind out of Gideon for a second. He remembered Mara at 3, fevered and glassy, her hand finding his in the dark like an instrument that plays a single note, steady, true, until the fever breaks. Mr. Vale? He turned. The nurse held out a clipboard. Next of kin, she said gently. He shook his head once. No. Emergency contact? Sloane answered, voice steadier. Damon Lark, she said. My COO. The nurse wrote. And Sloane looked at Gideon again, decision moving across her face like weather. And Gideon Vale. The nurse glanced between them. Then she wrote the name without judgment. Gideon felt something settle heavy and warm in his chest, like a chain looping over a cleat, holding something at a dock that might otherwise drift away. They wheeled Sloane for imaging. Oren went as far as the door allowed, then watched her go with a soldier's jaw. Gideon took him to the vending machines and let him choose the worst possible snack because control sometimes looks like pressing a button and getting salt and sugar on demand. The boy chose pretzels with peanut butter. He ate them in precise bites like he was rationing courage. "Does it hurt when you wait?" Oren asked suddenly, and the question was so surgical it made Gideon blink. The kid didn't mean pain, he meant the helplessness of doing nothing while a thing inside someone you love gets decided without you. "It hurts," Gideon said. He wasn't going to sell nonsense. But waiting is also doing something. It's choosing not to interfere with the people who know what to do next. It's the hardest kind of help. Oren nodded like he already knew that but wanted it said out loud by someone who would not lie to him to make himself more comfortable. Gideon texted Maya again. A photo returned, Mara on Maya's couch with a bowl of cereal big enough to count as architecture. Mara's thumbs were mid-air in the blur of a message, "Tell the person you're helping that I said good luck. Also I got an A on the fractions test and I used your trick with the pizza slices, ****. Gideon laughed quietly, the sound refusing to apologize to his own fear. He typed a reply with one thumb, then slid the phone away. He watched Oren, who watched the hallway, who watched the door where his mother had disappeared. The layers of watching felt like scaffolding around something fragile. Imaging returned with the doctor's verdict, "We need to take the gallbladder. Tonight." Sloane listened like a CEO trailing a finger over a contract's main clause. Questions came from her in a line: risks, recovery, timeline. She asked what would happen to Oren when she got wheeled in. She did not ask for special treatment. She asked for clarity. Gideon spoke before he could overthink it. "I'll stay with him," he said. "If that's okay." He looked at Oren for consent, and the boy nodded so hard his hair shook. The consent forms made temporary families out of strangers. Sloane signed her name with a hand that didn't shake. She squeezed Oren's hand and said, "I'll be back before you finish that entire soda," and Oren said, "Liar," which made the nurse smile, and Gideon loved the kid on the spot for trying humor as a shield. They rolled Sloane toward pre-op, and Gideon walked beside the gurney until the locked doors told him where perimeter ended. She turned her head. "You didn't have to follow," she said. "I know," Gideon said. He didn't explain the harness scorch, or the way the hybrid's hum had sounded like a lie. He didn't say that when a thing is wrong and chooses your door, you honor the choice. Her eyes flicked to Oren, who tried to look brave and landed unbreakable. She gave Gideon a look that translated to, "Don't let him fold in on himself while I'm asleep." "I won't," he said. It felt like a vow. They waited. Oren watched a hospital TV with the sound off like captions could tell him the future. Gideon answered the questions a kid asks when he isn't asking the real ones. Will the scars hurt? Will she be able to swim next month? Will she still be CEO if they take out a piece of her? She will be more human, Gideon thought, and that might make her better at both surviving and leading, but you can't say that to a 9-year-old at 7:40 p.m. under fluorescent lights. Damon Lark arrived with a breeze of expensive cologne and the posture of a man used to being the smartest person in the email. Early 40s, immaculate suit, smile with too many teeth. His eyes flicked over Gideon like he was a line item someone forgot to budget. "You are?" Damon asked, the tone weaponized. "Gideon Vale," Gideon said, standing because this was a conversation that should happen with everyone vertical. "I run Vale Auto." Ms. Hartwell drove in. "I called the ambulance." He didn't add "and on the emergency contact she wrote next to your name," because that information was less about Damon and more about being available to the nurse when she needed to call someone at 2 a.m. Damon smiled to show disapproval. "We're grateful," he said. The words in our own way were implied. "We'll take it from here." "We?" Gideon asked mildly, because 3 men in suits had arrived with Damon like punctuation marks. Our team, Damon said, and gestured to the suits as if he had unveiled the concept of support at last. Your team can sit, Gideon said. The doctor will talk to family when she's out. The nurse behind the desk coughed into her hand and failed to hide a smile. Damon's gaze cooled. He stepped closer, his voice lowered like a threat that wanted to be a suggestion. Mr. Vale, Miss Hartwell is a public figure. She has enemies. The optics of this, he indicated the ER, the chairs, the very idea of pain, require careful handling. We need to secure her vehicle, her devices, his eyes cut to Oren. Her dependents. Gideon felt something old and disused tilt awake at the base of his skull. The Navy had taught him to recognize men who used language like fog. Her vehicle is secured, Gideon said. Her phone is in her bag. And her dependent is eating pretzels and safe. Damon smiled again, too quickly, which meant the words landed. Where's the vehicle? He asked lightly, as if it were the least important question in the room. In my lot, Gideon said. Behind a locked gate. We'll send a truck, Damon said. It needs to be in our custody. Why? Gideon asked. Not combative. Curious. A curiosity like a flashlight. Damon blinked once, recalibrating. It's company property, he said. Security protocols. Gideon nodded slow, like he accepted that answer and also like he had accepted a lot of answers from officers with polished shoes and sloppy truths. Tomorrow, he said. After I look at it. That won't be necessary, Damon said. We have internal mechanics. I'm sure you do, Gideon said. They can look after I do. Something passed between them then that wasn't about an SUV. It was about control. About who got to choose the framing of a day where a woman's body had announced a boundary and the men in her orbit were pretending that was a scheduling error, not a message. Mr. Lark, Gideon said, because stepping closer had its uses. Your boss just trusted me with her son and her life for an hour. She didn't know me. If you want me to trust you with her car, tell me why your protocols are urgent tonight. Damon's jaw worked once like his teeth were a puzzle. He smoothed his tie. Let me be candid, he said. There have been incidents. Harassment. Anonymous threats. We're proactive. We don't let loose ends dangle. You should work on that metaphor, Gideon said dryly. Loose ends dangle by definition. A laugh blinked across the nurse's face. She made it disappear. Oren tugged Gideon's sleeve, whispering without looking away from the TV, that's the man who talks to mom on the phone when she drives. His whisper contained a child's precise sociological study. This man lives inside systems, not inside rooms. Gideon knelt. I'm right here, he said, which was a sentence that had calmed Mara at 2 and might serve Oren at 9. And then he stood and told Damon, tomorrow. He said it like an order he had the authority to give because sometimes authority is a posture other people recognize even when they hate it. Damon didn't like it. He hid his dislike with money. I'll expect your cooperation, he said. You'll get my professionalism, Gideon replied. He didn't move his body, but the conversation ended. Surgery hours stretch elastic. The TV ran a loop of weather maps and local politics. Gideon's brain tried to make a to-do list because lists were his superstition against chaos. Asterisk order rotors. Call Mrs. Bissett about the Camry. Email the landlord about the leak. Replace the torque wrench Mara used as a drumstick. Asterisk he let the list be background noise. He watched Oren watch the hors d'oeuvres and thought of all the men he'd stood next to in small spaces while big things were decided elsewhere. When the surgeon returned, she came with the posture Gideon had seen in chiefs coming from awful meetings, shoulders aligned with truth. She did well, the surgeon said. It was inflamed, but not ruptured. We removed it laparoscopic. No complications. She's in recovery. Pain will be controlled. She'll be sore, but she'll be okay. Oren's exhale was a sound Gideon would carry like a photograph. Can I see her? Oren asked. In a bit, the surgeon said. She'll be groggy. One visitor at a time. Damon moved to the front as if proximity to the surgeon could rewrite the order of love. The surgeon did not even glance at him. Child first, she said, without looking away from Oren. Then one adult. Oren went with a nurse who walked at exactly his speed. Gideon remained in the waiting room in a stillness that looked like calm and felt like a wire pulled taut. Damon paced, phone to ear, speaking in words that sounded like actual words and meant air, alignment, stakeholders, contingencies. The suits murmured. A television told stories about other people's disasters to make this one feel smaller. Gideon's phone buzzed. Mara asleep here. She says the Aeon fractions is due to your pizza lecture. Also, eat something before you fall over like a Victorian fainting couch, ***. He smiled at his phone like it was a person. He hit the cafeteria and came back with the kind of food that counts as apology the stomach forgives. He ate standing, not tasting, then returned to the waiting choreography. When Oren came back, he was brighter. She smiled, he reported solemnly. Like a little. I told her you stayed. She said good. Damon's eyes flicked to Gideon over the top of his phone like he'd just lost a point in a game he didn't like losing. You can go now, Oren said to Gideon, and the words weren't a dismissal but permission, ***, you did the thing. You can rest, ***. I'll go check on your car, Gideon said. Then I'll be back. He wasn't sure why he promised that out loud. Maybe because leaving felt like abandoning a post, and he had done that exactly never in his life. He drove back to the shop through midnight traffic that felt like the city exhaling. The lot sat under a streetlight that flickered like a lie detector. He keyed the lock, slid inside, and stood still in the dark until the shape of the hybrid introduced itself to his eyes again. Gideon had bent over 1,000 engines and listened to 1,000 sounds. He knew when a machine was lying. This one had been lying. He popped the hood and lifted the flashlight beam like a scalpel. The scorch mark at the harness connector hadn't grown. It hadn't needed to. Someone had shaved insulation off a cable the width of a pencil lead, a surgical wound on a nerve. Barely visible, enough to arc if a certain load profile was met. Under lab conditions, it might look like a manufacturing defect. Under road conditions, it might look like nothing until it was everything. He lowered the beam to the brake system, because another part of his brain, not logic, but the animal that survived deployments, whispered look there too. The lines gleamed, the connections were tight, the reservoir was full. He traced the hard line with a finger, down the firewall, along the chassis, to the flex hose. There, near the bracket, where a pebble might kick up and excuse damage, he found a nick that wasn't a nick. Microscopic, purposeful. Gideon exhaled. He put the flashlight down and sat on the shop stool like he was sitting beside a friend who had lied under fear and only now confessed. The configuration wasn't designed to fail catastrophically. It was designed to degrade intermittently, to introduce doubt. You get 3 scary moments, maybe 5, before a person sells the car, or starts taking rides, or, if the person is a CEO with enemies, blames union saboteurs or the man in the next boardroom. He took photos. Not because he thought he would need them later, though he might, but because taking a clear picture of a lie is an act of respect for the truth. He bagged a wire shaving with tweezers like it was evidence, because it was. He labeled the bag with masking tape and a Sharpie because ritual makes you feel like you controlled something. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered because tonight had taught him to answer everything. Mr. Vale? The voice was female, calm, smoky with 2 a.m. fatigue and experience. Yes. Lieutenant Briar Cho, City PD. We had a call from County that Ms. Hartwell listed you as an emergency contact and that you took custody of her vehicle for the moment. I'd like to know if there's any reason I should send a tech to look at it before it moves. Gideon looked at the nicked line, at the shaved insulation. There is, he said. And I'd like anyone who looks at it to come with a camera and gloves. I can do that, she said. You at your shop? Yes. Gates locked. I'll meet you. I'll be there in 20, she said. Don't touch anything else. Wouldn't dream of it, he said, though dreaming of nothing else was exactly what his brain had planned for the next hours. He hung up and sat in the quiet. Silence in a shop is a specific silence, the sigh of cooling metal, the tick of expanding and contracting things, the tiny sounds that remind you the inanimate is always moving. He thought of Sloane under anesthesia, of the machine breathing for her while hands did careful violence to extract what her body had decided it no longer wanted. He thought of Orrin with the sticker on his knee, playing soldier with a soda like it contained orders. He thought of Mara asleep on Maya's couch, a hand fisted in the blanket like it could convert to a lever if the world shifted angles. Headlights swung across the lot. A second car, right on the first set's tail. Not patrol cars, sleek, black, the kind of nondescript that screams significance. Gideon felt his body settle into the old stance, weight on the balls of his feet, mind-mapping exits, hands open. Lieutenant Cho proved to be smaller than her voice, with eyes that missed nothing and a braid that meant business. The man behind her was in plain clothes but moved like a cop. The second car's driver stepped out wearing a suit Gideon had already met, Damon Lark. Mr. Vale, Damon said, as if the late hour made them friends. I brought corporate security. We'll be taking the vehicle now. Cho didn't break stride. No, you won't, she said, flashing a badge that looked bored with being argued with. I'm here to document potential tampering. Damon's smile turned thin. Tampering, he said, making the word sound paranoid. With an executive vehicle? What are the chances? Higher than the chances of me letting it out of this lot before I'm done, Cho said. She had the amused contempt of a person who had dealt with men like Damon for a living. Gideon led them to the gate. He unlocked it, swung it wide, and watched as Cho donned gloves without ceremony. He pointed the beam and let her eyes do the rest. He didn't narrate. She didn't need it. She made a pleased humming sound, the sound of someone who, like him, loved catching a lie by the throat. Yeah, she said softly. Someone wanted plausible deniability. Cute. She glanced at Damon. You still want to move it tonight? Damon opened his mouth and closed it. We'll coordinate with you, he said. It hurt him physically to say it. Good boy, Cho murmured, not exactly to him. She took photos, then nodded to Gideon in a way that felt like professional acknowledgement. You did right to call. Tell me, why did you pop the hood? It hummed wrong, Gideon said. Like a lie with rhythm. Cho grinned like she liked that answer. I'm going to borrow that. She straightened. We'll impound for a full workup. You coming to the station to sign the chain of custody? Gideon looked at the clock in his mind, at the sleeping daughter, at the recovering CEO, at the boy in the waiting room building scaffolding out of vending machine food. I'll come at 6, he said. I have a kid to get to school. We'll send someone with the form in the morning, Cho said. Sleep if you can. Damon stepped closer when Cho turned away to speak into her radio. Mr. Vale, he said, softer. Off the record, did Miss Hartwell say anything to you about threats? Gideon leveled him a look that had once kept a junior sailor from blowing a gasket. She said ow, he said. That's my report. Damon's mouth twitched. He looked at the hybrid like he wished it would swallow itself to save him trouble. We appreciate your discretion. You appreciate control, Gideon replied. Different animal. Cho's team loaded the hybrid. Paperwork slapped. Gideon signed where he had to. The gate shut with a clank that sounded like a period at the end of a long sentence. His phone buzzed in his pocket again. He checked the screen. Unknown number, he almost let it go to voicemail. He answered because something in his bones tilted toward take this call the way a hull tilts toward a swell. Gideon? The whisper was small, hushed, and full of the kind of bravery that leaves a tremor on the last syllable. Orrin, he said immediately, because the shape of the fear in the voice belonged to a child who had watched monitors until his eyes hurt. It's me, the boy breathed. They let me sit in the room while she sleeps if I'm quiet. Mr. Lark left. A different man came in. He said he's from security but his shoes squeak different. Gideon's body cooled. What do you mean? He was already moving, grabbing his keys, locking the shop door with practiced hands that didn't fumble. He shook my mom's hand when she was awake before, Orrin whispered. Tonight he came back but he didn't knock. He's standing by the machines, and he keeps looking at the door. He has a paper bag. He told the nurse he's doing a quick check. The nurse left. He's opening the bag. Okay, Gideon said, door locked, feet already pounding toward the truck. You're doing great. Can you see a name badge? No, Orrin said. He tucked it in. He has a thing. Like the thing the nurse had. With a needle. The keys bit Gideon's palm. He turned the engine and gunned it. Listen to me, he said, voice suddenly very calm, the calm that lives under the bottom of fear. Quietly slide under the bed. Keep your phone. Don't make sound unless he touches your mom. If he touches her, you yell as loud as you can. Yell help and stop. Say you're calling the police. Push the red button on the wall. I'm scared, Orrin whispered, the confession a release valve. I know, Gideon said. He ran a red light with due affection and an apology to the night. I am too. I'm on my way. Do not hang up. Orrin's breath sawed quietly. The phone crackled with hospital sounds, beeps, the sigh of climate systems, the soft rubber wheels of someone's pain rolling past. Then, a man's voice, soft but wrong. Just a little adjustment, the voice said, the tone you use on pets and the powerless. Metal clinked. The monitor beeped twice and then sped up like a heart learning new bad news. Orrin, Gideon said, because keeping a kid rooted to instructions is how you change outcomes. Tell me when his back is to the door. Now, Orrin breathed. Push the red button, Gideon said. He heard the faint muffled thud of a kid's palm on plastic. Alarms birth more alarms. The voice pitched up, annoyed, what the? Orrin, yell, Gideon said, and the boy did, the sound high and breaking and beautiful because it broke the room open. Footsteps. 2 sets. The soft whoosh of a curtain thrown back. Sir? Sir, what are you doing? A nurse barked, no longer anyone's quiet helper. The phone filled with a tangle of noise, a man's curse, a nurse's command voice, the thump of something accidentally intentional hitting a wall, the skitter of a tray. Then a hard click like a plug being jammed somewhere it didn't belong, a monitor screaming in long, flat protest. And the line went dead. Dead. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Gideon's world narrowed to white lines on blacktop and the steady, feral beat under his ribs. He kept Orrin's phone pressed between cheek and shoulder, begging for the sound to return, for breath or whisper or the scrape of a shoe. Nothing. He stabbed the hospital's main line with his thumb, demanded the nurse's station for recovery, gave the room number before they asked, then did what he hated most, he hung up and trusted strangers to get there first. Trust was a muscle you kept from atrophying only by hurting it. He drove like a pen stroke, clean and decisive, the V8 unrepentant as it gulped night. He cleared the ER loop and took the employee entrance because locked doors were suggestions when the Navy had spent a decade teaching you that perimeter is a poem until someone writes in blood. The first thing he saw when he hit the corridor was motion, 2 nurses moving the way people move when they accept adrenaline as payment later, a security guard fumbling with a badge that had never been asked to work this hard, a tray on its side like a bad omen spilled into stainless. The second thing he saw was a boy's sneaker toe poking from beneath a bed skirt. Hey, Gideon said, voice pitched low and human so it wouldn't make the small body flinch into a smaller shape. Orrin slid out from under the bed like a Marine from cover, breathing too fast, eyes wet but holding. He clutched the phone like a weapon he had already used. A nurse had a hand on his shoulder, but the boy's gaze locked to Gideon as if it had found the horizon again. Behind them, a man in scrubs, mid-30s, trim beard, eyes that wanted to be anywhere else, was being efficiently introduced to a wall by the security guard and a compact woman in slate slacks who carried a badge and the kind of authority that made even panic listen. Lieutenant Briar Cho didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Hands where I can see them, she told the man, while the nurse snapped, that is not hospital protocol, with the righteous heat of someone whose protocols were the thin line between human and hurt. Gideon took 2 steps to the boy and swept him into his arms. He didn't squeeze. He let Oren do the squeezing, body shaking against him like something unspooling after too much tension. You did it right, Gideon murmured, low by the boy's ear. You did exactly what we planned. Oren nodded into his shoulder. He smelled like vending machine salt and fear and kid shampoo, the kind with a cartoon on the bottle. He was going to push something, Oren said, words tripping. The thing with the needle. But the nurse came and she said stop, and he said it was supplemental antiemetic, but he didn't scan, and she said he had to scan, and he got mad and... Breathe, Gideon said, his old mantra a metronome. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. He did it with him, felt the boy catch the rhythm and ride it like a rope. Mr. Vale, Cho said, not looking away from the human geography of the room. Nice to see your timing is still unnerving. I try to land on the beat, he said. What VE we got? Man presents as float nurse. Badge reads Leary. Badge barcode doesn't register. Tried an unlabeled bag at a sedated patient's line. Child hit the crash button like a champ. She shot Oren a quick nod that looked suspiciously like respect. We'll sort the rest in an interview room. For now, your Ms. Hartwell is stable. My Ms. Hartwell, Gideon repeated, as if the grammar had snuck in to make him conspicuous. He didn't fight it. The imposter, Leary or not Leary, tried to turn his head. Cho discouraged the idea with a precise relocation of his shoulder blade. Eyes forward. Her partner cuffed him and read him promises about rights. The man's jaw flickered, equal parts anger and calculation. He looked at Gideon once, like he was a variable he'd failed to account for. Who sent you? Cho asked. Not soft, not loud. Interested. The man said nothing. Silence sometimes made people feel tall. Cho smiled kindly, like she was measuring him for a slightly shorter silence. Is she okay? Oren asked, cutting to the only data that mattered. Gideon angled him toward the bed. Sloane lay there, pale and sleeping, but with that post-surgery slackness that reads as peace when you've seen people in real trouble. The monitor had returned to a reasonable conversation with the heart it watched. The 4-line was taped and secure. A second nurse, older, the sort who can command a ward with 2 eyebrows, hovered between guard and guardian. She's okay, Gideon said. And she's going to be better when she wakes up and sees the kid who saved her night. Oren's mouth tried to decide if it was allowed to smile. It chose humility. You saved it, he whispered. We saved it, Gideon corrected. Teams are how you beat terrible odds. He caught Cho's eye. Car and this, he said, the sentence a bridge between the 2 attempts. Cho's mouth thinned. Patterns are my love language, she said. I like when they show up with their chins out. She glanced at the cuff man. This smell like one person's initiative to you? Smells like a process, Gideon said. Like someone rehearsed where the weak doors were. Then let's go lock some, she replied. I'll keep one of my folks on the door until discharge. The rest of this circus goes downtown. Damon Lark arrived not as a man but as an effect, expensive shoes clicking you into the next act, suit jacket that suggested legal counsel in every pocket. He took in the cuffed imposter, the officers, the boy stuck to Gideon's side, and Sloane sleeping. His face did something contradictory, relief and fury courting each other. What happened? He asked, controlling his voice the way he probably controlled a spreadsheet. Cho held up a hand without looking back. Later. She fractioned off a statement to a nurse, then to the guard, then to her partner, all without changing volume. Damon took it like a command he wasn't used to receiving. He tried again, this time angling for Gideon. Mr. Vale, Damon said, aiming for collegial and landing near supplicant. Is Ms. Hartwell? She's stable, Gideon said. Because the kid hit the button. He let the attribution land where it deserved to. Damon's eyes flicked to Oren. His expression adjusted to include an idea of tenderness. "You're very brave," he said, and though the words were not wrong, they arrived a beat late, like he was reading the teleprompter of human connection. The older nurse, who had no patience for men learning empathy like a second language on her shift, pointed at a sign that said one visitor at a time and then pointed at Damon like that had become a personal instruction. He nodded tightly and stepped back. The cuffed man was escorted away. Cho left the uniform posted and pulled Gideon into the small consultation room where confidentiality goes to rest on plastic chairs. She sat, and the chair suffered it. "Okay," she said. "We have a tampered vehicle and a bogus clinician with intent, both linked by a time window the size of a TV ad. Who benefits? Someone who wants her scared, compliant, discredited, or gone," Gideon said. He didn't have Hartwell Dynamics spreadsheets in his pocket. He had instincts groomed by storms. If they were committed to gone, the car would have gotten the job done when the freeway is thick and brakes make prayers. At the hospital, they wanted the optics of a complication. Death by bad luck. Lines get crossed all the time. Cho nodded. "You've seen worse." "I've seen people hide malice in the parts of the day everyone assumes are safe." The click of a seatbelt. The drip of a bag. He rubbed a thumb across his palm, feeling grit and life. "Who knows she came to me?" "Ambulance dispatch, ER intake, your neighbor, you, the kid, me," Cho counted, fast. "And whoever shadows her movements for a living." Her gaze landed on the waiting room like a targeting reticle. Damon was on his phone, voice filed down to a quiet that meant fury was a budget line item. "You don't like him," Gideon said. "I don't know him," Cho replied. "Disliking is a luxury. But his type tends to think access equals virtue." She pinned him with a look that had made rookies confess to crimes they hadn't thought up yet. "What's your type, Mr. Vale?" "The kind that shows up when a kid calls," he said. She accepted that answer with a small nod. "We'll want statements." She slid a form across the table. He took the pen. He wrote what the night had actually been, not the shorter story that would be easier to file. When they were done, Oren had climbed half onto a chair, half onto Gideon, the way kids do when they have not yet relearned how to sleep after a scare. The nurse led him into recovery again. He took the chair at his mother's side and resumed his vigil, this time with a blanket that declared him an official participant in care. Sloane woke near dawn with pain braided to fog. The first thing she saw was a ceiling tile that looked exactly like a ceiling tile. The second was her son's hair trying to flatten itself against gravity. The third was Gideon, ragged and upright in a chair that had not been built for kindness. "Did we lose?" she whispered, voice roughened. "You won," Gideon said. "Twice." He said it in a way that made the ugly hours part of the victory, not a stain on it. Her eyes found Oren's face, and she let herself touch the back of his head, anoints it with the kind of kiss that says "I'm still here" in all languages. Then she looked at Gideon. "You stayed," she murmured. "I told him I would," he replied. She searched his face like there was a ledger in it. "Mr. Vale," she said, and then, "Gideon, because names change function when people see you hold the weight of a night for them. I need truths. Short ones." "You had acute cholecystitis," he said. "Surgery went fine. Someone posing as staff tried to put something in your fore." Oren triggered the alarm. "Lieutenant Cho made a new friend in handcuffs. Your car showed signs of tampering. It's in police custody." Sloane's face became very still. You could almost hear the calculus crunch numbers like bones. "Damon?" she asked, not because she believed it but because any leader with sense checks for rot at the root. "Unknown," Gideon said. "He showed up. He wanted the car. Cho said no. I said later." Sloane exhaled, which in her condition took courage. She turned her head slightly. Damon stood outside the glass with a cup of coffee he probably hadn't paid for and an expression arranged to be sympathetic rather than predatory. He caught Sloane's eye. His face warmed with curated relief. Let him in, she told the nurse. And then kick him out when I'm tired. The nurse smiled. I'm already ahead of you, she said, and opened the door like she would open a class to a late student. Damon stepped in, performing apology, concern, and managerial continuity like a one-man show. He said the right things in the right order, thanked Oren with perfectly calibrated adult-to-child diction, told Sloane that the board had been notified, that the press had been given the script about a routine surgery, that security had been doubled. When he paused, Sloane asked, which security? The same security that cleared a ghost with a needle? Damon's smile faltered. We're reviewing protocols, he said. Reviewing is what people do when they're too late, Sloane murmured. Fix them. Then, the car? Impounded, Damon said, like the word offended him personally. Lieutenant Cho insists on handling it as potential evidence. He did not say the next sentence, but Gideon heard it, against my explicit and reasonable objections. Good, Sloane said. For once, I agree with someone you don't. Her eyelids dropped halfway while pain and medication held a tug-of-war. We'll coordinate with the police. We'll keep our mouths shut. Her gaze slid to Oren. We'll go home when they let us. Damon looked from mother to son, then to Gideon, who had become immovable furniture in the room. Mr. Vale, Damon said, shifting tactics. Hartwell Dynamics would like to offer you a retainer to consult on our executive fleet. Clearly, you have a knack for. No, Gideon said. He didn't mean it unkindly. He meant it the way a surgeon says scalpel, precise and necessary. Damon blinked. No? I run a shop, Gideon said. It keeps my lights on and my kid fed. You need a mechanic you can't buy. He let the words hang, then added, but I'll tell you this for free, whoever touched that car knows your systems. They knew where scrutiny was lazy. Fix that before you buy me. Sloane smiled then, small and real, not for Damon but for the man who had declined the deed to his own future. Mr. Vale will invoice us for his time today, she said, shutting that door with executive elegance. And you will pay it without adding clauses. Damon nodded, trapped between his respect for her leadership and his discomfort with not winning. Of course, he said, which meant, for now. When he left, the room exhaled. Oren, who had been tracking adult crosscurrents with the acuity of a child who had been raised in winds, sagged back and let his fingers resume counting the stitches on his blanket. Can we go home soon? He asked. Soon, Sloane said. We'll have to do the walk, and the stairs. You'll carry the bag. Not too heavy. I'm strong, he said, affronted. I know, she replied. That's why I have to tell you to do small things. Strong people forget how to do small things with care. Gideon stood. Coffee, he asked the room generally. Tea, Sloane said. Something that tastes like grass and regret. Hospital kind. He saluted with 2 fingers and went in search of the blend. In the hallway he found Cho at a rolling computer, tapping like she enjoyed war with bad software. We pulled footage, she said without preamble. Ghost nurse came in on a temporary badge issued to a contractor who hasn't worked a shift in 6 weeks. The badge was signed out by, she turned the screen so he could see. A security supervisor named Harrow. Works for a third-party vendor Hartwell uses. Does Damon sign Harrow's checks? Gideon asked. Indirectly, she said. Vendor to vendor. Enough distance to pretend to be surprised. She took a sip of coffee that had given up. We'll squeeze Harrow. The car's in the lab. Preliminary says your eyes are as good as your swagger. I don't have swagger, Gideon protested. I have tired. Sometimes those are the same. She glanced toward Sloane's room. You in this because you like puzzles, or because you like people? Yes, he said, and made her laugh. He returned with tea that met Sloane's exacting standards for awfulness. She drank it like penance. Mara called during normal people hours, voice bright with kid dignity. Are you done saving the CEO yet? She asked, the sentence a knife that cut pretension out of the air. Working on it, he said. You good for school? Maya's making me eggs that are actually omelets, Mara reported. I told her you don't trust omelets because eggs shouldn't lie about being folded. She laughed for 5 minutes. Also, I told her that if you don't come home by noon, I'm coming to the hospital with an Uber and a water pistol. Stand down, Lieutenant, he said, smiling into the phone. Text me a photo of the outfit that will terrify your teacher the least. She sent a selfie in a t-shirt that said I like big books and I cannot lie. He felt his heart do the small ridiculous dance it only did for her in Dangerous Engines. By mid-afternoon, Sloane had walked 10 steps that felt like a mile and treated it like a contract clause she'd satisfied. Discharge would be tomorrow if she kept making nurses believe in her. Oren guarded her like a knight with a juice box. The press found out anyway, because press is a gas that fills whatever container you leave unattended. Damon tried to build a perimeter with statements. Sloane refused to be wheeled to a back exit like contraband. She sat up, hair in a no-nonsense knot, hospital gown rearranged to suggest a person and not a patient, and told the camera, I had a routine surgery. The team here was excellent. I'm lucky to have a son who understands buttons and a community that shows up when we ask. We'll be reviewing some internal processes. For now, stop making my nurses nervous. Gideon watched from the doorway, impressed despite himself. She hadn't lied. She'd relocated the story to the people who deserved it. Cho's update came as evening settled. Harrow rolled, she said, eyes bright with the savage joy of work done right. Vendor boss leaned on by someone who didn't want their hands near the visible parts. Leads to a fixer who's done quiet work for a cluster of companies that cohort around Hartwell's contracts. Nothing directly ties your Damon, yet. But he did text Harrow's boss within an hour of the badge getting signed out. Make sure we're covered is interesting when read after the fact. It will be interesting before a judge too, Gideon said. She shrugged. Sometimes interesting turns into admissible. Sometimes it turns into a promotion. We'll see. She tipped her chin toward Sloane's room. She talks like a leader on good days. Let's see what she does with bad ones. Bad days, as it turned out, weren't new to Sloane. By the time discharge came, she'd set up remote protocols to audit her security vendors, given the hospital a donation large enough to fund 3 more guards who would not fumble badges, and told Damon, in a meeting Gideon unintentionally overheard because nurses are generous with doors when you carry tea, that he could take a leave or take a pay cut and prove he knew how to do due diligence from a desk without plane tickets. Damon looked like a man finally meeting the limits of being indispensable. Mr. Vale, Sloane said on the sidewalk, dressed in soft clothes that made power look kinder. You carried a lot of weight for me. She extended a hand that had closed big deals and, last night, clutched a bedsheet and fought. Let me carry a little for you. You already did, he said, thinking of the name on an intake form and a kid's head on his shoulder. And you are about to when your company pays for the parts that will make my truck stop pretending the brakes are a suggestion. She laughed, then winced, then laughed again because it hurt less if she chose it. Invoice Damon, she said with regal malice. Make the line items extremely descriptive. Oren popped up between them like punctuation. Can we get pie, he asked, because children, after trauma, need rituals of sugar. Mom promised that if she didn't die we could get pie. We can accommodate surviving, Sloane said. We will over-index on pie. Maya insisted on feeding all of them first, because neighbors are the structure beneath every headline. She set out a table that mocked the concept of appetite with its generosity. Mara sat across from Oren and made him laugh with an analysis of the hospital TV channel scheduling logic that was cruel because it was true. Sloane listened and let warmth rearrange her ribs. When pie came, apple, because sometimes cliches are medicinal, Gideon let the sugar do its sacrament. The conversation swam to the edges of what had almost happened and then back to safer shores. Sloane asked Mara about fractions. Mara, who had never been shy about praise, said, My dad weaponizes pizza. Sloane said, Hire him for your board, deadpan, and Mara said, You can't afford him, and Oren, not to be outdone in the banter department, announced, He already works for me. The laughter pulled them into a new gravity. Later, as the house quieted, as Maya gathered plates and refused to let Sloane lift anything heavier than a fork, as Oren fell asleep with his hand still inside a bag of chips like he was claiming territory in dreamland, Sloane stepped onto Gideon's tiny back porch. The night had that honest chill that makes people tell the truth more economically. "I don't like needing help," she said, watching her breath draw faint lines. "No one does," Gideon said. "But it's a good way to meet the people you should trust." She looked at him, eyeing the scar above his eyebrow he usually forgets he carries. "You could have walked away after the ambulance." "I tried," he said. "But your car lied to me." "Thank you for listening." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and hissed at the tenderness at her incision. "I'll send you every security report from the last year. I want your eye on the seams." "I'm not your consultant," he said gently. "But I'm your neighbor when the world gets loud. That I can do." She accepted the boundary like a gift. "Then be that." They stood like that for another minute. Then Sloane's phone, cleaned, documented, returned by a satisfied Lieutenant Cho, buzzed on the porch rail where she'd set it. The screen lit with a number that wore no name. She glanced at Gideon. He nodded. She answered. The voice on the other end attempted anonymity and achieved a kind of cowardly fame. It was flattened by a scrambler, filtered to sound like something that had forgotten its own throat. "You forgot your place," it said. "You made noise." Sloane held the phone a few inches from her ear so the sound couldn't get inside her body. "You overestimated yours," she said, calm as a person reciting an address. "And you met my neighbors." The voice breathed static like it wanted to be a fire. "You can't build walls high enough." "I'm not building walls," she said. "I'm building witnesses." She put the call on speaker and set the phone down on the rail as if it were an insect that had landed badly. "Say hello to two of them." Gideon leaned in. "Hi," he said, pleasant like a polite menace. "We bagged your favorite trick. Next time send your name in the gift basket." The line clicked. The night returned to its normal sounds, a distant siren that meant someone else's trouble, the hum of a transformer, Mara's laugh through the screen door. Sloane picked up the phone. "I hate that," she said. "The drama. The stupid theatrics, like they're auditioning for a role only they care about." "People who don't get hugged enough by scramblers," Gideon said. She smiled. It was small and warm and almost imperceptible outside of a life where you learn to see small warmths as proof. "He's right about one thing," she said after a beat. "We can't build walls high enough." "Good," Gideon said. "High walls keep out the wrong people and the good ones with the pie." They were quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't need repairing. After a while, Sloane said, "I need to send you something else to look at." "Not tonight." "When I can say yes to understanding what it means." "You'll know when you know," he said. "And when you do, bring tea that tastes like regret. We'll call it due diligence." She nodded. "Deal." 2 days later, Cho called with a voice that sounded like a report, put its boots up and grinned. "Harrow gave up a name," she said. "Not Damon. A board member who benefits if Hartwell loses a contract renewal. They laundered the access through security vendor shells and an outsourced compliance firm who'll be reshuffling staff soon. We've got 4 in cuffs and 1 on the run who won't be on the run long. Your photos on the harness and the brake line help nail the intent part. DA likes intent." "You just told a mechanic the DA loves intent," Gideon said. "You're ruining me for small talk." "Small talk is for people who sleep 8 hours, Cho said, then softened. "Good work, Vale." "It's not work until it's billed," he said, and she snorted. Sloane went back to work 3 weeks later with ports of pain that had become borders she could cross without paperwork. She changed vendors the way you change locks after a break-in. She stood in front of her board and said, "I don't care how cheap a subcontractor is if they sell us to the first bidder with a burner phone." She made enemies. She measured them by their sudden quiet. She checked on her nurses by first names, and 3 of them cried in a supply closet because rich people usually send flowers, not policies. Gideon returned to his shop, which loved him with the need that old machines have for the one guy who hears their true music. He fixed 3 transmissions, taught Mara long division by letting her balance invoices, and replaced the towel dispenser that had been making everyone swear. He walked through his gate at night and let himself imagine a future where he did not spend it catching knives other people threw, but he kept his hands open and his phone charged, just in case the world had another child who would whisper, "I'm scared," into a phone while lying under a bed and saving the day. On a Saturday, Sloane and Orrin drove by in a modest, boring sedan that had been checked by more people than a space launch. She stepped out like a person who had found a way to be both softer and more dangerous. She handed Gideon a box of donuts that would end his week well and an envelope that made Damon's temple vein throb wherever he happened to be standing. "It's a retainer," she said when he raised a brow. "Not for consulting. For friendship. You'll return any unused portions in the currency of showing up." "That's not how retainers work," he said. "It is now," she replied. "I'm the CEO." Mara and Orrin chalked hopscotch boxes across the oil-scarred concrete and argued about whether ruled lines counted as cheating. Maya brought lemonade and told them both that rules were polite fictions until someone skins a knee. The radio in Bay 2 played something old and stupid and perfect. Gideon leaned against the bay door and let his heart practice peace in the open, because practice makes possible. He looked at the people in front of him and thought, sometimes saving someone's life means taking a call and not letting go until the room fills with the right noise. Sometimes it means hearing a machine lie. Sometimes it means being the person who refuses to move when someone says, "We'll take it from here." Sloane, watching him watch them, said, "You know you didn't just save me, right?" He shrugged. "I know I did what anyone decent would have done." She shook her head, smiling. "I know about decency. It's rare. When I find it, I make it expensive." He laughed. Then he sobered, because a habit of sobriety is how he convinces luck to stick around. "Keep your doors boring," he said. "Keep your cars honest. Keep your kid's hand where you can feel it." She nodded. "And you?" "I'll keep listening," he said, and the admission felt like something final and beginning at the same time. Phones buzzed. Shop doors hummed. A gull shrieked as if the ocean had walked too far inland. The day exceeded its brief as ordinary. For now, that was a victory that didn't need witnesses. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.